seat taken?
Nobody's in the seat, then I ain't taking, son.
So this is, Sabacc?
Sabacc.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Sabacc the Block. This is our review of Star Wars Andor. This is episode 11 that we're getting into. This is called The Daughters of Ferrix. I'm here back with RB3. We didn't do episode 10, Prison Break episode. We missed that. I did a short little video on TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us on First Cut on TikTok if you haven't done so already. But we are doing episode 11. Episode 10 was obviously crazy. So much stuff happened in that episode. I was on Triad of the Force, a podcast of a couple of Puerto Rican homies. Go check that out. It was a really good time. But I'm back with RB3, back in the house. Episode 11. What did you think of this episode? I want to start with this one first. I know 10 is like spicier, but this one is kind of like the follow-up of a spicy episode. So I want to get into your thoughts on this one.
This was a nice follow-up of the spicy episode, also a nice emotional journey, a nice emotional arc, especially when we see, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but when we see Marva, I believe that's how you pronounce your name. Marva passing away. That was a heartbreaking moment, and you could feel it all across everybody at Ferrix, the introduction of these new kind of group, that the Daughters of Ferrix, which we saw a little hint of, but I'm not really sure what they're alluding to going forward with that. But that seems like that's going to be pretty important. And I mean, ultimately, I think the last scene at the end, or one of the last scenes at the end, but this conversation between Saw Gerrera and Homeboy was one of the deepest, darkest like conversations in Star Wars history, and it was just juicy, and it was just like, wow, this is the kind of sacrifice that everybody's just willing to make. So I'm loving it. I always compliment the dialogue and the writing. Again, when you got a guy, the showrunner of House of Cards, Andres, we did a whole podcast about House of Cards. The head showrunner is part of the writers' room for this show. Just not even the head writer, one of the writers for this show, man. Come on. Bro, this is too good.
It's too much, man. It's too much fire for one meal. This is like a 6-course meal, bro. This is amazing. I'm loving it too, man. I really enjoyed this episode too. It was definitely the come down episode, but it has a lot of emotional weight to it, mainly because of the Cassian stuff, the Marva stuff, the Ferrix stuff that is added inside of these ingredients and this 6-course meal that I already mentioned. But let's start right off the bat with that, man. This episode starts out with Marva's death. This is Cassian's mother on Ferrix in a very, under the breath, anticlimactic, happenstance, sickness kind of death. Like nothing dramatic, nothing like she died in battle, she died fighting stormtroopers. She just died of being ill. And it's a very kind of sad off-screen death that really kind of paints the realism of what this show is, because that's kind of what happens when you have older parents and when you have older people. They're going to pass away, and it's not going to be this, super dramatic, epic, mounting death that we might see in other Star Wars shows or in other Star Wars media. What do you think of this death and the way they did it, but also the way they're using it as the hook to try and get Cassian back to Ferrix and to do a send-off in the finale on Ferrix with Marva's death?
Well, it was fascinating because at first, when they first showed the opening, it seemed almost like there was like a waterboarding situation happening for like a quick flash second, like the underwater stuff. I was like, what is this? What is this alluding to? And I thought that was alluding to her death. I'm guessing that maybe is alluding to Andor, Cassian, and like swimming his way out of that stuff. I'm not really sure what that like little underwater flash was alluding to there. But seeing the way they handled that death was sad. It was traumatic. It was something that feels familiar. It was something that felt real, something that feels very down to earth. And the fact that she wanted to go out in a big fight. She wanted to stand up to the rebellion and just didn't have a chance to. And we saw her ailing, sickness earlier when Cassian had visited her before. So you knew the time was like running out. It kind of almost makes you wonder how much time exactly was Cassian in that prison thing, because they weren't counted by days, they were counted by shifts. So it could have been, a certain amount of days. It could have been, I know they had the countdown or whatever. I'm not sure if it was like 3
I
months.
think shifts were days though. I think so. I think they made that kind of clear with the night shift representing the days as well. But I might be wrong. I don't know.
I don't know. Again, I don't know. But it just goes to show maybe he was there for an extended, maybe a little bit more time than we think, like just by the day count. And maybe that's why it seems like her illness like progressed to the point that it was. And yeah, I was seeing other people's reactions, especially B2. the droid B2. Yeah,
emo.
Heartbroken. Yeah. Heartbroken. Which is definitely the most emotion I've ever seen coming out of a Star Wars droid. Like out of the emotional cute BB-8 stuff, the way just the camera held on this one sad look that BB-8 gave when the whole boy was like, oh, I want to leave, I want to go home, and he was just like, can you just stay one night? And BB-8 or B2, my bad, B2 like,
say BB-8.
yeah, my bad. The bees are just mixing up. He gave it that little like look of silence, and it was just like, all right, yeah, I'll stay one night. Like that was sweet.
It's heartbreaking because it really is kind of this, I don't know. It really kind of it kind of destroyed my vision of droids, if I'm being honest. Not destroyed, but it really colored my vision of how sentient they are. They're so sentient that the fact that they feel pain when someone they love is gone. And I was like, damn, really? Like, I didn't know it was this deep. And obviously we've seen so much variety in droids in all types of Star Wars media, but this one feels a little different, mainly because I feel like the voice actor does a really good job of demonstrating that emotion. Because BB-8, R2D2, even C-3PO is like super sassy, and when he shows emotion, it's still in a kind of a sassy kind of way. This one is just like a very emotional guy in general, and that's why they call him B2 emo. I'm guaranteeing that's why his name is B2
emo.
I literally think that's why it is,
man. Yeah.
But it really does feel like he doesn't get it. He doesn't get why does she have to die? Like, why does Marva have to go? Like, can I be with her? Like, it very much is like this reluctant acceptance of death, and the concept of death itself is so difficult for B2 to understand. And it's just heartbreaking because you just want to hug the guy, and you just want to be like, it's okay, man. It's tough. It was tough, man. I can't lie. It really was a tough way to show that droid, to the point that I was like, I kind of feel like this show is so savage that they might kill B2.
Oh my gosh.
Because think about it, K2 has got to come up somehow in this next season. So how is he going to have 2 droids? They're going to have to kill this little guy, is what I thought. And I was like, that's going to be this igniting factor in Cassian where he just goes ham. I hope not, but that's kind of where my mind went in that entire scene.
I will say though, like having B2 emo, having his grieving process kind of almost mirror Cassian's in a way too. How even though Cassian was like far away and not able to be close to his mom, you could kind of almost see like in that one little phone call, he's like ultimately like super reluctant too. Like he has to hastily get off the phone at the end scene because him and Homeboy have to get on the run or whatever. But you could almost see that kind of like the B2 emo's grieving was almost like a substitute for Cassian's grieving to a certain extent, but they felt like the same. You felt the same emotions come through, Even though with Cassian, you get it in like 1 or 2 looks. B2 emo, you get a couple more scenes, but it's a nice way of expressing the real grief felt behind her death.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, and I know this is a weird reference, but it kind of reminded me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Body, the episode Body. I don't know if you've seen Buffy, but Anya's reaction to the death of, spoilers, Buffy's mother inside that episode, where Anya comes from a different background of literally a different dimension, a demon dimension. So she doesn't understand the concept of death that well. So she's asking all these weird questions, and she's not really accepting the death that well. And it kind of reminded me of how B2 again, being a droid doesn't really have that concept settled down so well as much as the people on Ferrix do, where they're just very much like, yeah, this is another dead person. You know, we're gonna keep doing the traditions we always do.
Yeah,
It's just
beautiful
another
tradition.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is like a really deep, like beautiful tradition to like
putting the
make
people
you
in the
part
wall.
of the establishment of Ferrix. Like you're part of building a new, you know, a Ferrix. And I think that's just a deep, you know,
Yeah, it's
way
very
of
deep.
what am I saying? Somebody.
For sure, but the way it's being used to hook Cassian back to Ferrix in order for Dedra to get his hands on him, in order for Cyril to get his hands on him, in order for everyone. Cinta is trying to kill him, like dead ass trying to kill him on orders of Clea. Everyone's just trying to kill Cassian from all different sides, and they're using his mother's death, her funeral, as the hook. What do you think of that? And I mean, that's obviously brutal on so many different layers, but what do you think of that being the main thing, getting him there?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the motivating factor. I mean, when you say it like that, I mean, I definitely, yeah, definitely is bringing Cyril there. It's definitely bringing, oh boy, oh girl there too, Deidre. But yeah, also yeah, Cinta is also in town waiting for that. Almost makes me wonder. Yeah, I mean, it almost makes me wonder, like, is she gonna like see, is she gonna like flip sides, or what's gonna happen here? Because there's so like there are a lot of crazy parties here. We still have Bix, who's like actively being tortured still for some reason. Like, holy crap. They're still trying to figure out who
the leader is.
Stan Skarsgård. Yeah, Stan Skarsgård is. Yeah, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's looking to be like a crazy like shootout kind of finale. I have no idea how Cassian's going to get out of this, other than maybe Cinta seeing the ISB people, you know, or her having a change of heart or something, or maybe Val even making a call like, yo, he's let him off the hook this time, like his mom just died, you know, whatever. But it is kind of a dark place, and that is like a real thing. I mean, this is like some real OG gangster
I was
stuff,
gonna say
like
some mafia stuff.
Yeah, something you'll see out like The Godfather, or something you'll see out of like Goodfellas or something like that.
Yeah, you wait for them to go to a person's funeral, and that's where you take him out, you whack him. Yeah, it's some real dark gangster stuff, bro. This is, I mean, the whole show has been gangster since day one. Luthen's a gangster, dead ass a gangster. So I think it's crazy, but I really do feel like he could take advantage of Cinta and Deidre trying to kill each other, maybe, and then he can try to hide with the people of Ferrix, because I think the people of Ferrix still have his back, even though they're probably mad about the whole situation that he put him through. I still think they have his back. So at the end of the day, I think they're going to support him no matter what. So I think he's going to use that to his advantage. But I definitely think we're going to see some bodies at the end of the season. In El Pionero Número Uno, the guy first off the board, in my opinion, is Cyril Karn. I think homie's done. I think he's
You
going
think he's
like,
dead?
oh, he has to be. He has to be. If he doesn't die this season, I'm gonna riot. I'm gonna be so mad. How is he gonna show up to Ferrix waiting for a fight with Cassian and end up alive? Like, I just don't see how it happens, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I think the way he was just like, yo, I'm going to Ferrix, man. I'm gonna take him out. I'm gonna steal my mom's money and my mom's credit card. Like, let's go. And I was like, bro, you suck. You still suck, bro.
I don't know. I kind of see him. I kind of see him taking the dub, because I feel like the classic character arc is like you see somebody have lows, taking the L's, and then they eventually take a W at the end.
That's
I feel like
true, but this show's built different, bro. That's why I like this show. That's why I was like, this is the kind of morbid show where it does this with Marva's character, where it doesn't give her an epic send off. It gives her a sad send off. This could be that kind of show where they're like building up Cyril to have this epic moment, and his epic moment is just that he just gets shot.
right.
But we'll see, obviously, at the end in the finale.
Which, by the way, I definitely think if he doesn't die, I wonder if there's going to be a Deidre and Cyril season 2 romance kind of situation happening. Are they going to be googly eye for each other? Is he going to be actively stalking her like he was last time, or what's the situation going to be this time around? But yeah, I think it's crazy, because I think a lot of the people on Ferrix maybe might not even vibe with Cassian, but maybe he'll start telling the stories of what happened on the prison and what happened with the people there, and maybe that'll re-spark another kind of rebellion amongst people, because I know that's what his other homie, who we saw in Rogue One, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
how he kind of alludes to what people needs, how people need to be told about this situation. Because yeah, when you think about it, they are really the only two survivors that we see out of that whole
That we
situation. We
see.
don't, yeah, we don't see too many others. I'm hoping that Kino comes back for a season 2 cameo or something like that.
I think they have to have made it out. There's no way out of, what did they say, 5,000, 4,000 people?
Yeah.
5,000? There's no way. The odds are too high for them. 2 out of 5,000 is way too low for to have broken out and have gotten off planet, in my opinion. But we'll eventually find out. Go ahead.
You think Kino? You think Kino survived it? You think he got off?
I don't. I think Kino got recaptured, if I'm being honest. Maybe this is me being morbid again. But if he can't swim, he can't swim. I think he stayed on the platform, and then eventually Imperial forces came and put him back in prison. I think that's pretty brutal. But or maybe put him to death. I don't know. That might be the thing for breaking out in the first place, which might be the better outcome considering what Bix is going through now. So, but real quick, let's jump to Narkina, right where Cassian is with Ruska. Hobie's name is Ruska. Isn't that like isn't that like the most gangster name? I don't know. I think that's a cool name. Every time I knew his name because of freaking Star Wars trivia, and it never came up.
Yeah, because he is a real obscure character in Rogue One.
Yeah, and I was like, I know exactly who that is. His name is Ruskat Melshi. That's his name. Everyone calls him Melshi, but I call him Ruskat because I was like, yo, Ruskat. That's wild. But we find them trying to run off planet, and there's some locals on the planet who capture them, trying to steal their ship.
Such a funny scene.
And then they happen to be good Samaritans, and they happen to be people who hate the Empire because they're poisoning their water. And it kind of is that little bit of that underestimation of the own people that you're suppressing, ending up betraying you and not supporting you and not supporting the people that you're supposed to condemn. Obviously this is definitely the most Star Wars scene in the whole show. It's the most Star Warsy scene in all of Andor.
It is definitely Star Warsy and goofy, but I will say
that's what Star Wars is.
even on that level though, it was still really well written. Like it was still like, because it started off like, they're really gonna capture this dude. Like they're really gonna capture him, and they're like, like you're just making up excuses. It's the Empire. Like you're really thinking like, and they kind of deceive you by their looks. Like, these guys look like a-holes. Like these guys look like people you don't want to trust. So obviously they're gonna be like pro Empire. But then they catch you off at the end, like, and I love how he says a line like "snub the Empire," which is basically like "f the Empire." Like, I love how they basically literally were just like substituting one word with like a cuss word with like a made up word. Everything, even though it was a little goofier and it was a little sillier, I definitely think the way that, just for some reason, the way that they acted it out was almost like they did the weird like Yoda putting the subject after the verb or whatever. So it kind of like made the language a little bit more Shakespearean. So it was just a little bit interesting. I like that scene.
Yeah, I liked it too because I think it communicated a lot. Obviously, through all the goofy Narkina-ness of it all, it still communicated the idea of the Empire, like I said before, underestimating its own suppression, in the way that suppression can bring this out of people. And just like Luthen's speech in episode 5, where he says, I think it was episode 5, where he says, this is what happens when you squeeze too tightly and when you suppress too tightly and when you get angry, you get more anger out of people. You rile them up. And when you rile them up like this, that's where they're going to help out supposed criminals from the Empire, because the Empire does way more harm than these criminals could do. So you're going to help out the criminals. And I love that they just gave him a ride. They're straight up just like, where you want to go? And he's like, let's go back to Niamos. And he's like, Niamos? All right, cool. And then they just fly off in their quad jumper. I thought that was hysterical. And I thought it was funny how he said he wanted to go back to Miami. I
was going to say, like, you just got arrested there, bro. Like, you
going back to Miami.
Yeah, you just got arrested there. I realized he was picking up the blaster and the money.
It made sense. Yeah. At first I was like, well, you're stupid. But then I was like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Also, deep cut. The person who's in his bed, inside that apartment or that hotel, I'm not sure what it is. I think that's Ula Musters, who is the prisoner that is with Jin in Rogue One when we first meet Jin and she's imprisoned.
Really?
Yeah, it
No
it
way.
looks like her. It's supposed to be a female, so
Ah,
but it looks like her, the same species at least. But this is me going back to my Star Wars memorization
that's
of everything I
crazy.
memorized in Rogue One. But I was like, is that Ula Musters? But
Ah,
I think it
but
might be.
wait, so it was was that the same girl who he was with before? That was a different girl completely.
No. This is an alien creature that was in his
Yeah.
bed,
Uh,
who we see in the cell of Jyn Erso in Rogue One, which kind of got me thinking. I was like, wait a minute, does she get imprisoned because they found some sort of evidence connecting her to Cassian back to that hotel, and then they blame
oh.
her saying that she was helping Cassian, and that's why she's in prison in Rogue One.
Ah, oh, that's deep.
I
Oh,
was
that's
like, yo, that's cold.
deep.
That's so messed
Oh,
up.
that's super
He
cold. Oh, dang.
inadvertently put someone in prison because it made it seem like they were helping him out.
Right.
I
Oh,
was,
yo, that's cold. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot.
and I was like,
Oh,
that'd be
nah.
so messed up. Like
That's deadly.
he would feel so bad about that. I'm sure Cassie would feel bad about it. And she's in prison for something she didn't do. Uh,
Right.
I don't know. That's what I thought. I
That's
might be
deep.
off, but I thought that was kind of funny. But either way, we see Cassian go back to Niamos. But before that, let's jump back to Coruscant, which is Mon Mothma's scene with her little girl. I think her name is Leda. I believe her name is Leda or
Mhm.
Lida. But we see her and other little school children, girls, reciting this Chandrilan prayer poem of old traditional values. And Mon Mothma is freaking the heck out about this whole thing. What did you think about this scene and the way it's so subtle, communicating this weird Chandrilan tradition that her daughter is partaking in, that clearly Mon Mothma is afraid of because of what it can do to children and the kind of traditional mentality that it can instill inside of her little girl?
Well, to me, I mean, to me, it reminds me of national anthem. You know, to me, it reminds me of
Mm.
when kids have to do the national anthem. Literally, that weirdo tradition that teachers make everybody stand in front of a flag and say that God loves America and stuff. Like, why is that a real thing? That sounds like if Americans heard that coming out of like Iran or Iraq or some other third world country or some other dictatorship, North Korea, we'd be like, why are y'all doing that? That's weird. But we do it and it's totally fine. So I definitely think that's part of it. And I think that's why she's like, why are you doing this? Like even in my household, like in most black households, the national anthem's like, bro, what are you doing? Like you standing up for that? So it's just like why so that's kind of how I feel about that too. And honestly, obviously, we've talked about this show like a lot on the Sabacc the Block so far, and we haven't made the obvious comparison that everybody's been making, which is like the Nazi comparison, like the Holocaust Nazi like kind of comparison that the show is definitely implying for as well. I think that's also a part of it too, right? Like she's kind of being indoctrinated into some sort of hateful, kind of low key fascist, nasty ideology, which even her husband, who seems like somebody who's kind of like morally questionable, kind of doesn't really have any good moral high ground. Even he's like, I'm not even into this, So it's kind of fascinating. It's enough to even kind of make Mon Mothma be like, maybe I do give this daughter away and get these funds cleared off. Maybe I do.
I didn't read it like that at all, but I did read it as her kind of fearing what her daughter is becoming because of her own hand almost, and because of
Mm,
her lack of hand, if that
mm,
makes sense. Kind of her absence kind of helped her kind of propel into this direction. And also the idea of now her being proposed to by this other guy who comes from this other family who has these values already instilled in them is only going to further make her deeper dive into this weird Chandrilan traditional cultural value that seems to only value Chandrilans. That even the guy who came in, who's an old school Chandrilan guy, said, like, even the Empire is even going too far, in my opinion, because they're going too far against me. like against my values and my interests. And it's much more about the a nationalism in his own country, in his own planet, where he's like, even I'm against the empire, but for nationalistic reasons. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because I don't think we've ever find someone like that before. But that's, to me, is what it exemplified. It exemplified her realizing like this is eventually what's going to happen, unless she does fight back and unless she does get the money that she needs, because eventually she's going to have to get that money. And Vel is there too to kind of help her out and help her sort through that.
But yeah, that money's looking impossible for her right now. I mean, she's like, yo, there's literally no way this money could be moved. And which is, again, I thought that's why I thought at the end of the scene, it seemed like she was like, maybe it's giving away this daughter situation. Might not be half bad. I don't know.
I don't think she was saying half bad, but I think she was kind of agreeing with it. She was like, all right, I might have to go along with it.
Right. At least for now. I do gotta say too, the most the dopest scene, I'm sure you're gonna mention it right now. I'm probably beating you to the punch, but the dopest scene, like, so one of the dopest space scenes so far this series is seeing Luthen pop out and getting pulled over by the popo and blasting his way out of it with the reverse cannon, using that little, for one, the tractor beam is dope. I know we've seen tractor beams in Star Wars before, but like kind of seeing more of like an up close kind of understanding of the technology, how there's like levels to it, how they can kind of ramp it up, and how he was like simultaneously like calculating how to like ramp it up counterclockwise to pull in the other direction. I thought that was dope, the way he was kind of BSing them like, oh, I'm just a farmer, I don't know what to do here. Like, it just like I don't know, I thought it was funny. And I also just love the irony of the fact that like, yo, if literally these Empire dudes, because the Empire, the fake Alderaan ID ended up working, if they literally just would have like flown with the fake Alderaan ID and literally just would have went with it, they wouldn't have had those problems. But it's because Old Bull is like, oh, let's do some target practice. Let's have a practice run. Why not? Like, that's what just led to them having that. So I don't know. I thought that was just a really, really fun, dope scene right there.
Oh, it was awesome. But I feel like you definitely jumped the gun, because before that we got the Saw scene with Saw Gerrera. But since you're jumping to this one,
what am I doing? Yeah,
I was gonna say, but
I thought the Saw scene
time
was last. Yeah, for some reason.
No, this was after that.
Okay,
but still, since you jumped to this one, let's just get to it, because we see how badass Luthen is, not just as a person, but behind the wheel too. Straight up Dominic Toretto. He's like, you're not gonna catch me, bro. I got family. But straight up using all these technology that he has on that crazy ass ship, with the crazy AI that he has on that ship, is absolutely insane. Like, I don't think we've seen too much like it. It's similar to a little bit of the Falcon, because the Falcon is definitely on that level. That's what I first thought of. But even the Falcon didn't have this kind of tech when it comes to the anti tractor beam technology. I thought that was super interesting. And it was just a bunch of little missiles that shot at the little dish. I thought that was really cool. That's a way to take down the tractor beam, because the tractor beam focuses on the hull, on the ship, and it doesn't focus on tiny little, like, it looked like little bullets. And I was like, that's a cool way to get around it, for sure. And the way he's able to brush off the TIE fighters, it just killed him like so quick, so easy. And he uses that laser to just blast him off, and then he's like, all right, psh, blast him off, all right, light speed time, boop, whoop, and he disappears. And then the guy's like, damn. Like, I literally thought it was just gonna be like, damn,
right,
who the hell was that?
right.
Like, that's that man. Like, there goes that man.
Right. And you know, well, so
Straight up
so
pulling Mark Jackson, like, mama, there goes that man.
I mean, yeah, he was blown away. He saw those explosions in the window. He was like, what am I gonna do?
He's like, yo, that's the GOAT right there. That's Luthen real.
I mean, he keeping it real, but
keeping it real.
I think, you know, it's funny. I think with the missiles, I don't even know, honestly, the way I kind of perceived it, I think he just fired them. I don't even know if they had like the best of aim. Honestly, I think the tractor beam actually is the thing that attracted them to to them, and that's what
because
ended up
small, they can come faster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's what actually, I don't even know if it was even like that super sophisticated of technology. I think those are just like regular missiles that he just shot out, and then they just ended up having that strong effect. Now the laser stuff was different though. That almost reminded me of like that Kylo Ren lightsaber. You know what I mean? Like how it kind of had like the two flip sides, because he still had shooters on the front, but he had two lasers on the side. That's kind of deadly. You don't see that in a lot of ships. So that was really, really nice right there.
Yeah, it was dope. And I like how they played up the way, like you said before, as far as him pretending that he didn't really understand, trying to get the engines up, trying to get the engines down. And he was boosting one side of it to try and
Mm,
charge up the weapon that he has.
mm,
But that way he disobeyed the orders of the Empire. Either way, like you said, they still would have found a reason to try and board him and try to
mm,
find some sort of way, even if the Alderaan fake tag that he used would have been accepted. They still would have been like, this guy is still a little too suspicious. Let's try and find a way. And he just didn't want to risk it. So it's
mm,
kind of interesting how, even if he did have the cover story and if he did play along, he still chose the much more aggressive approach just in case they did choose to board him and try and capture him. So he really didn't want to risk it at all. But yeah, before that, we get to Saw and we see two tubes back. Obviously, we keep seeing two tubes, but we see Luthen come back to Saw. And he's like, yo, man, that plan you had with Krieger, I'm back on board. Let's do it. Right after we found out last week that he
mm,
just said that he's willing to let Krieger and his 50 men die. And we learned this week that he says it's 30 men now. But he says that he's willing to let Krieger die. So Saw being back on this plan, it was an interesting way to Luthen try and find his way out of this, right? How do you explain this away? And it's such a fascinating, intense, layered scene as far as what the rebellion is, as far as what the Empire has led Luthen to do. That entire speech he gave was basically distilled in this one scene with this conversation with Saw. But what did you think of this entire conversation and situation that they were in?
well, the situation is just like so morally like gray and like weird, like because at least like Luthen did the right thing and told Saul like, yo, like this is the situation, you know, I'm not gonna hide any chips. Luthen could have just let it happen and let it just roll and not said anything about it. But then that would have been jacked up and that would have messed up the whole situation. But I think it was good that he was upfront and honest about it. But it was interesting how Luthen had to convince Saul that he was real and upfront about it. By at that one point, like he was pointing to old boy, I think it was Tutu, like, yo, he did it. He did it. He was like, what? Not me. He like, it's like, no way, you believe him? He pulled the gap from him and pulled it up to Saul. And was like, yeah, now you listening. Now you listening. So I thought again, the tensions are high, but you're starting to really understand like these are the intense sacrifices that they're trying to make when they're at war. Like I say, it's just like Saul Guerrero said, it's not even calling it like call it whatever you want. At this point, it is calling it war. It's life or death. People being lost on
Yeah,
both sides.
and that was a bar, bro. When obviously when he
Yeah.
says for the greater good, and I was gonna repeat it. I repeated it when I was watching it, obviously because I watched it alone, so I'm allowed to talk back.
Mm.
But when he said for the greater good, I responded, and I was like, yeah, for the greater good. And then Luthen responded, and he was like, dude, whatever you want to call it, man. And then Saul was like, all right, let's call it war. And I was like, yo,
Yeah, it's deep.
that's even more of a bar.
Star Wars.
Yeah, but before that, he was saying like, "What if it was me? Like, would you burn me?" Uh, and I was like, "Yeah, he totally would.
Yeah,
He totally
yeah,
would." But
no
even he
question.
said, like, in a way, he said, like, "Saul, you're a little bit more special because you know me more personally. So if I gave
Mm.
you up to the authorities or to the
You gonna
Empire,
snitch?
you
Yeah.
could, yeah, you could snitch on me, and you know
Mm.
me a lot more than Krieger." And he's like, "You don't know Krieger?" And he's like, "Barely."
Right, right,
He's like,
right,
"I've met him
right,
once."
right.
I don't think he really remembers me. So I thought that was kind of funny too, how he kind of chose Saw over Krieger in a way,
Mm.
as far as that scenario being played out in a different manner. So I thought that was a very intense, incredible moment as far as Luthen trying to talk his way out of that situation with Saw, and Saw trying to rationalize the idea of sacrificing Krieger to the ISB and to the Empire is something that's absolutely brutal yet fascinating into what the rebellion actually is. So I loved it. I thought that was one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, and it really shows Luthen's character and who he really is, and it leads to that next conversation with Luthen and Clea. We can talk about that quickly, where he talks about the sale and the price and the values, and everything is just code words for collectible items. And he's like, but the next collector is going to get mad about losing the sale. And she's like, you got to move on from this sale. You can't be focused on just one sale, because then the business is just, and I was like, it's all business talk and like about
coded language.
coded language about how this is a market and how it's basically just business terms. So how'd you think of that, the way they were talking about Cassian and Vel and Cassian's mother?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, it was just like pieces in a chessboard, like they said, collectors and who they're going to collect. And I feel like when they're actually, you know, I feel like when we're talking about like these moments in the rebellion, they're almost like, you know, the way it's almost like similar. It's almost like a strange parallel, like the breaks that the people in Ferrix lay for when people die, versus when like the way these people are talking about like life or death. You know, the way Luthen and Homegirl are talking about life or death, right? Like it's all part of a bigger piece. It's all part of a bigger journey. It's all part of something that's like matters a lot more than just like the individual. It's all about the greater good, the collective. So it's just like a fascinating, like when there's like so many oppressed against the empire versus like a huge oppressor like the empire, you know, that like the human sacrifice has got to come on some level.
Yeah, and I really do feel like the way they're painting Clea and Luthen in this show is a matter and very much with it's very much like on a Saw Gerrera level, where they're much more on like a no holds bar, hold nothing back kind of mentality, versus the Mon Mothma approach that we're eventually going to get in Rogue One, where she is the one who's calling the shots and she is the one organizing the meetings, where it's a much more balanced, much more heartfelt approach. And that's kind of what Vel is hitting at when she meets up with Clea, where she talks about like, I'm tired of all these rules, I'm tired of all this stuff, I'm tired of you talking about people like they're nothing, is essentially what Vel is kind of talking about in that moment. And Clea is still very much, you know, centered on who she is and being like, this is the way it is, you know, you're just one part of a machine, you know, you mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. Like she even says like, you're one of many people in one of rotating plates, I think is what she says. I forget the exact line, but it felt like you felt the weight of what Luthen has created and what Clea has created alongside him, which is why I feel like she's eventually going to take over him. And she feels like she is like the second in command. So I'm excited to see where that goes, obviously in the end. But I do feel like this is eventually going in Mon Mothma's direction, where she has a lot more influence and power into everything she does. But let's move on to the ending, which is Cassian finding out that his mom is dead on the beaches of South Beach, abandoned now, which I thought was a very powerful statement about what the Empire does, even to the most party cities and all the party cities. It turned it into basically a no-show
Ghost town
place.
Yeah,
a ghost town. What'd you think of him finding out? And honestly, to be honest, man, I feel like there's been a lot of Diego Luna acting moments, but I feel like this moment, the way he subtly mourns, because he mourns, but he subtly mourns in front of Ruskat, where he's just trying to hide all of his emotion. And while Ruskat is giving the speech about like, yo, we gotta be out there, bro. We gotta go against the Empire. We're gonna do this stuff, man. We gotta do all the. And I was like, and he's still mourning his mother. Like he's just like, yeah. I got you, man. Like, how'd you feel about this scene and the way he was acting this scene?
Yeah, no, he did a really good job, and I thought he performed. I thought he did really good, and I thought he like really showed, like you said, the subtlety behind his eyes of the morning. And there was a really quick moment, but he brought it. And again, like I think all of Diego Luna's performance moments in this series have been like top tier. So this has been no different. But yeah, it's like him that morning transitions into that motivation that that homeboy that Rusko was talking about, that's ultimately like driving him to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the show is incredible. It has so many layers, and this episode is no different. I cannot wait for the finale. But those are our thoughts on episode 11, The Daughters of Ferrix. Thank you, RB3, for your time. Everyone can find him at Director RB3, and they can check out Timestamp on Amazon Prime. You can rent that, you can buy that. Either way, help out RB3 with Timestamp. You can follow me at Squad Leader Race on Twitter. I've lost like 250 followers, so make sure you guys help a homie out there, and find us on TikTok at First Cut TMO. But either way, guys, for Sabacc the Block and for the First Cut crew, we're gonna be peacing out. So peace.